Backstories are an important element to storytelling to help us understand who or why a character is the way they are, and I think most people would agree with me when I say that usually the most interesting backstories are the ones given for the villains. Like I said, that's usually the way it is, but at least for me, in the case of Jujutsu Kaisen, the author, Gege Akutami, has delivered several backstories, but the ones that I think hit and left impressions on people the most so far were Yutas from Volume 0, and Hidden Inventory, also known as Gojo's Past, and the arc where we see a young Satoru Gojo become the strongest modern-day sorcerer after being defeated by Toji Zenin. The events from these flashback arcs, specifically Gojo's Past, created ripples that went on to form the crashing waves that helped form this story. But this video isn't about those backstories, it's about the Heian period flashback and how I think we will end up receiving it. Of course, this is all theory, and if it doesn't play out the way I think it will, then feel free to come back and tell me anytime about how this aged poorly or something, but if you enjoy this video, please leave a like and subscribe. It's the easiest way to support what I do. So the Heian era flashback is one of the most anticipated arcs that people would like to see in Jujutsu Kaisen, and I think there's been a few good times to show us now. We have kind of had little peeks here and there, and with characters like Yorozu before her death, where we got to see her meet Sukuna, which resulted seemingly in her death. It's unclear here what happens, because afterwards we know at some point she makes a vow with Kenjaku to become a player in his culling game years later, so maybe she didn't die right away. Another time we got a look back in time was during Kashimo versus Hakare, their fight in Tokyo Colony number 2, and we saw the moment where Kashimo decided to take Kenjaku's offer. From this flashback we can see that he wished to fight the strongest opponents, and we can see that his life was drawing close to an end, and he decides to take up Kenjaku on his offer as well. Kenjaku approaches him, telling him that Sukuna is still the strongest sorcerer he's ever encountered, but he's 600 years too late to fight him unless he joins his game another 400 or so years later. It's also here in this flashback that we get to see Ryu Ishigori's original form. There are a few other characters that have gotten smaller flashback moments in the story, but the ones that people care about the most are Kenjaku and Sukuna. Everyone wants to know their past. Ever since the end of the Shibuya incident arc when Kenjaku said to Yuji and Sukuna, who was inside of Yuji, "It is beginning again, the world of the Heian, the Golden Age of curse techniques," fans have been waiting and wondering when we would see this flashback and foaming at the mouth to see how these moments will unfold. And based on our other main character flashbacks, I think it's fair to say that this one will bang the same way that those did. But I think this one will be a little bit different. Like I said before, while I've talked a lot about flashbacks, this is still a theory video, and I want to know what you guys would think if the Heian period was split up into 2 flashbacks actually. Based on the way I'm imagining things will go, I don't really see it becoming a movie. I know they like to make movies out of story arcs nowadays, but I don't think they'll do that, and that's because I think that this flashback will be split up into 2 parts. I think that first part will be coming very soon actually, and it'll be told through the eyes of Uraume, the character who is the most loyal to Sukuna. But before I talk about that, I want to say why I feel like we won't actually see a flashback from Sukuna's point of view. From what we know about Sukuna so far, he himself isn't one who I would imagine would dwell on the past. When asked by Kashimo if he became the strongest, or if he was simply born the strongest, he responds that he doesn't have any idea, but he's sure he was seen as a creepy kid. That's the official translation anyway. The fan translation of this has Sukuna respond with, "I was born a cursed, unwanted little wretch." That much I can say. Neither really answers Kashimo's question to me about whether he was born the strongest or earned that title, but what we do know is that he is in fact the strongest sorcerer, not only in the Heian period but also today, now that he has defeated Satoru Gojo. And Sukuna continues on to tell Kashimo that he is one who eats when he is hungry, plays with whatever he finds amusing, and kills anyone who dares to get in his way. He lives according to his nature and doesn't care if anyone doesn't like it in the end. When all is said and done, in the end of the story, or whenever Sukuna's arc is completed and Sukuna is finally defeated, I don't expect us to go into any flashbacks at all, so none of the Demon Slayer style sad stories showing anything like him losing his family or being poor and having to scavenge for food because he didn't have anything or anyone. Even if he were to have a flashback from his point of view, I believe Gege has already said that there would be no redemption for his character, so he wouldn't try and make us feel bad for him. When Sukuna goes out, I think he'll have a smile on his face and it'll be a glorious and bloody end, and he would be happy that he got to live and die doing what he loved. For that reason, I think the flashback will be told by Uraume. Now, Uraume is an interesting character for a few reasons, like one being how or why they are even allowed to be in Sukuna's presence. I get it from Uraume's point of view. Respecting and worshipping the strongest fighter in existence makes sense, but why wasn't Uraume simply killed off years ago? Even though I don't think it's anything involving actual romance, I do think that very soon we will get our answer as to why Uraume loves and respects Sukuna so much. I don't actually know if I'm completely sold on the idea of Hikari being the one to kill them, but I think when they do find themselves against death's door, we'll finally get a look into their old life. Imagine with me for a moment when Uraume is almost dead. We do actually get a Demon Slayer-esque flashback, but in the flashback, maybe we get to see Uraume as a child living in maybe just a random village during an era where people would pray to Sukuna and invite him to their villages to try and make peace with him so that he wouldn't bring calamity to their lands. We already know that this is something that happens in story because during Yorizu's flashback we saw Sukuna come to her village and people were talking about him coming there and, you know, destroying their crops and stuff like that. So it's not really out of character or question for this to happen. I'm envisioning at some point Sukuna comes to one of these villages either because he's simply seeking a challenge or he just wandered in and decided to wipe out everyone, but maybe in the end he finds a young Uraume either defending their home and decides to spare them because he found them interesting, or maybe Uraume was the best cook in the village and Sukuna killed everyone there besides them. I'm just spitballing obviously, but based on the data book info we have, we know that Uraume cooked for Sukuna, but the last idea is that maybe Sukuna found Uraume in a way similar to Geto finding the twins in that village. I think it would be really interesting if Gege went that route and we saw parallels to Geto saving the kids from the village, and so maybe Uraume was someone that the people were afraid of and kept locked away, and they just never wanted to hurt people or be a bad kid, so they never retaliated until Sukuna came after maybe hearing that like a dangerous kid lived in a village only to find them as a prisoner. I could see Sukuna freeing Uraume if they were a prisoner and, you know, telling them something like, you're stronger than these, you know, puny humans or peasants or whatever, and you should be strong and show them. Don't let anyone hold you back or something like that. Either that or, like I said, the first one where it's like Uraume is defending the village and everyone dies, and it's kind of like a Vinland Saga Thorfinn situation, and they follow Sukuna and eventually become infatuated with him. I think either of these scenarios would result in Sukuna thinking the kid was interesting and at the very least willing to watch them grow so that they could one day be another potential opponent for him. We know Sukuna is willing to let people grow as sorcerers after he let Higuruma basically learn reverse curse technique on the fly. I think following the introduction of Sukuna to Uraume, we would then see time go by as Uraume grew older with age and watched on the sidelines while Sukuna would tear his opponents apart on the battlefield. We might get to see things like Sukuna versus the Sun, Moon, and Star Squad that Uro was a part of, along with the 5 Dark Generals. This would make their love and admiration for his strength grow with each battle, and we would only ever get to see their thoughts about how Sukuna might feel and not ever get to look into Sukuna's mind, but this would also show the moments that make Uraume so defensive. I could see there being situations where Sukuna would defend Uraume even if in his mind it was only because he wanted to one day fight the kid himself. That might not be the case, but Uraume is very jumpy for Sukuna. Like, they jumped in front of Gojo and took a blow, they backtalked to Kenjaku all the time. There's a lot of times where Uraume is just very defensive and very just team Gojo and no one else, and I like to see why. I think this flashback would probably last up until Kenjaku tells them about the plan 1,000 years later to begin the Culling Games, and Sukuna and Uraume would agree to become cursed objects to be reincarnated later. Funny thing about this is in the manga chapter where Kenjaku makes a rule to end the game when his and Sukuna's hosts are the last one standing, he doesn't mention Uraume, which I found to be hilarious, but this was cleared up in the volume 25 extras after the fact, when Gege revised that to have Kenjaku also include Uraume in this rule, and the name of the body that was used for them was Shiori Himi. This lets us know that Uraume hasn't been around this whole time. I personally thought that they had just frozen themselves for years and maybe thawed out recently, but I guess Kenjaku woke them up right at the start of the story of Jujutsu Kaisen to get the ball rolling and have someone help him with planning. That's it for the first part of the flashback, and I think the second part will be shown through the eyes of Kenjaku. And first I want to say I think it would be hilarious if it was revealed that they were originally a woman, like Tengen was, if not only to just have all the Kenjaku backshot memes get turned on their heads, but anyway, I think for his flashback we would actually see it start from a young age. How young? I couldn't really guess, but I think we will watch them become fascinated with science and doing crazy experiments, or like sneaking in to watch exorcisms when they would have normally been considered too young to watch. Maybe Kenjaku would secretly conduct his own experiments starting on animals and things until he was maybe kicked out of the village for, you know, taking it a little too far, and then he decides to double down on his experimenting. What I really want to see is that first moment where that spark of inspiration went off and he realized his dream of wanting to create a chaos that he couldn't control, and how that led him to making deals with hundreds of sorcerers and curses. I hope his flashback would also show the inner workings of his curse technique along with his expertise in barrier usage, but mostly his curse technique, because it's really crazy to have an ability like his, and it really makes you wonder, like, how on earth do you even discover that you can transplant your brain and change bodies? What's the process for that even like, and does he need someone's help? Is that where Uraume came in when swapping to Geto's body? These are questions that need answering, but I think the big moments will come from seeing Kenjaku possibly interact with Master Tengen back in the day, or when he encounters Sukuna for the first time and how he convinces him to participate in the game of death 1,000 years later. And will we get to see any of the Gojo clan members that he faced off against in the past? I think it would be really cool to get some kind of montage of panels showing all the different bodies that Kenjaku has hopped in over the years, as well as moments of him encountering many of the different sorcerers and cursed spirits over that time. I'm starting to ramble on a bit, but you get the idea. That's how I imagine the Heian period flashbacks would go, but with a little more of that Gege beef to them. I can't think of everything, of course, but let me know your thoughts below. Do you agree with the theory or like any of the ideas I mentioned? Tell me how you think the flashback would go, or if you just think we won't ever see one at all. If you like the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you for your support. I'll see you on the next one.